Welcome back to Mystic Artistry Podcast. My name is Susan, and this is a space for storytelling, reflection, creativity, nature, and intuition. A place where we slow down, notice what's around us, and listen a little more closely to what's within. I've been thinking lately about how differently people move through conversation, emotion, silence, and even physical space. Some people process externally, and some people process internally. Some people need to talk in order to figure out what they feel, and others need quiet before they even know what they think. And I started realizing I've been both people at different points in my life. When I was a child, I was not shy at all. I loved to perform. I loved to entertain. I loved community theater, singing, dancing, making people laugh. On long family trips, I would sit in the back seat of the car and literally sing about whatever I saw out the window. Trees, clouds, restaurants, road signs, everything became a song. And eventually, my father would say, "Enough, Susan. Please stop. Give it a rest. We don't need any more music." And honestly, as a parent now, I understand that. I probably would have wanted a little quiet too after a while. But children absorb things deeply. And I think over time, I slowly began learning something many sensitive people do learn, that expression affects the room. Then later in life, my father used to say something else to me over and over: "You must think before you speak." Before I was impulsive, I was emotional. I said what I thought immediately, and sometimes it got me into trouble. So, somewhere between childhood and adulthood, something shifted. I went from blurting things out to needing 3 business days to process a text message. And maybe some of you understand that transformation too. What fascinates me is that when I eventually pursued a career in music professionally, I became a very shy performer, which is ironic. The child who once sang freely in the back seat of a car became the adult who suddenly felt self conscious being seen. And I think part of that change happened after my eating disorder. People often think that eating disorders are only about food or appearance, but they affect so much more than that. They affect identity, confidence, comfort in your own body, your willingness to take up space emotionally or physically. And singing is vulnerable because your body is the instrument. When you sing, there's nowhere to hide. With piano, there's a little more distance. The sound travels through the instrument first, but with voice, emotion and breath and sound emerge directly from you in real time. And maybe that's why I became more cautious over the years, more observant, more inward. Then teaching entered my life, and teaching changed me too. Because teaching isn't just talking. In fact, good teaching often requires restraint. Listen, you have to notice breathing, body language, insecurity, confusion, frustration, and hesitation. You learn to read cues. You learn that if you talk constantly, students stop discovering things for themselves. And maybe that's where I began valuing space. Space between words, space between thoughts, physical space, emotional space, even silence itself. I've realized that silence doesn't make me uncomfortable. In many ways, silence is where I finally hear myself clearly. But not everyone experiences silence that way. Some people rush to fill the silence because silence feels anxious to them. Some people process out loud. Some people stand very close when they talk because closeness feels more comfortable to them. Meanwhile, people like me are slowly backing up into another zip code, trying to find oxygen. And I say that lovingly. I once had a friend who stood so close when she spoke to me that I would literally keep stepping backward while she continued advancing forward, like she wanted to dance or something. That was my personal space. By the end of the conversation, I think I was halfway into traffic. But underneath the humor, I think these differences reveal something deeper about human beings. Some nervous systems seek intensity, others seek spaciousness. Some people regulate through expression, and others regulate through retreat. And what's interesting is that both people may actually be anxious at the exact same time, just in opposite directions. One pursues connection by moving closer, the other seeks safety by moving inward. And neither person is necessarily wrong. They're just speaking different emotional languages. As a musician, I think about this a lot in terms of phrasing. Music without pauses becomes noise. The rest matter as much as the notes. In jazz especially, space creates emotion, anticipation, shape, and meaning. And maybe people are like that too. Maybe some of us are conversational jazz musicians. We need pauses, breathing room, silence long enough to understand what we actually feel before we answer. And perhaps the people who talk the most are not shallow at all. Maybe they're trying to soothe themselves. Maybe they're afraid silence means disconnection. Maybe they're trying to think and feel in real time. And maybe the quiet people aren't cold. Maybe they're simply absorbing more than anyone realizes. I think many of us spend our entire lives learning how to balance expression and restraint, how to remain authentic without overwhelming ourselves or others, how to speak honestly without abandoning reflection, how to stay connected without losing our sense of self. And perhaps maturity is not becoming silent. Perhaps maturity is learning rhythm, knowing when to speak, knowing when to pause, knowing when to listen. And knowing that different people need different amounts of space in order to feel safe, creative, and fully alive. Thank you so much for listening today. And as always, I am listening.